Coach, we'll start with you. You're entering your second year as head coach at Allegheny and had the luxury of enjoying your first full off-season with a full recruiting cycle, spring ball, workouts, etc. How does it feel like the team is ahead of schedule in terms of being prepared for this season when looking back and comparing how things were at this time last year?
I definitely think compared to last year, yes. In particular, getting hired in mid-March and shrinking a 6 or 7 month recruiting cycle or off-season workout into 6 weeks, it really forces you to be on your P's and Q's, to be organized. And I think the biggest thing for us this off-season, we were able to get every full-time coach at the college strength certified. That pays dividends for us being around our players in the weight room, in conditioning sessions, and throughout the spring. So I was really proud to be around the guys from January through the end of the semester. And obviously you mentioned it in recruiting. That's huge. You can't fake relationships. So being able to be around recruits from the start of their senior year all the way through, that time in which they make their decision really helped us from, a number standpoint, sure, and getting the roster to where we want to be, but also know it'll help a lot in retention, right? Getting the right guys to stick around and having that 2, 3, 4 year career that we want them to have at Allegheny.
So you've already touched on your coaches. All three coordinators, Matt Cochran, Matt Handhold, and Brandon Peluso, are back on staff this year. How does this continuity at those leadership positions help you develop your systems in all three phases of the game?
Yeah, I think Coach Coleman mentioned it. Continuity is everything, particularly in this conference. If you look at the teams that have success from Grove City last year, Case Western, and those that have been able to retain coordinators, there's certainly something to be said for that, right? And the players that are learning the same schemes with minor tweaks or adjustments here and there. I think the biggest thing that it allows us to do throughout the offseason is figure out we are still a players, formations, plays-based unit and philosophy. It's how we approach offense, defense, and special teams. But having the same guys working together, you learn a little bit more into how we can tweak things, how we can make those subtle adjustments and figure out this is what we anticipate we're going to have in the fall. What can we change to make things slightly better on each side of the football or in special teams?
Okay. There are a few fifth-year seniors who've returned in key positions on both sides of the ball, including the young man sitting to your left, Zach, who's here with us today at inside linebacker. How much do you rely on experienced players like Zach to provide leadership to the younger athletes?
You have to. At the end of the day, whether we bring in, and we did a good job in the transfer portal, or have a large freshman class coming in, they're still going out and playing against some really good teams and great coaches for the very first time in this conference. So I think the best teams around in this league have to have that senior leadership, that upperclassman leadership that have been, into the fire, so to speak. Zach did a tremendous job this offseason, in particular in the weight room, taking some young guys under his wing in an offseason program that changed dramatically. I'm sure he can attest to that from his first few years at Allegheny. So it's also a big luxury to know you have guys like Zach in the locker room that are spreading the same message, that are holding players accountable in every walk of their Allegheny experience, be that football, be that the classroom, or certainly for us in the community as well, too. So couldn't be more proud of how he did this spring and have got a lot of faith in him. And you mentioned the other, Nigel Williams, a big fifth-year nose tackle coming back for us, again, on the defensive side of the ball. So they've been tremendous.
So you've touched on the defensive side of the ball, but in your time as both Allegheny's head coach and in your first stint with the team as offensive coordinator in 2017 and 18, you've played a part in several record-breaking offensive performances from the likes of former quarterback Logan Lee and receivers Alex Victor and Declan O'Brien. You seem to have a bit of a green thumb when it comes to developing offensive talent here at Allegheny. What's your secret?
I don't know if I'd say that. You're only as good as your assistant coaches. At point blank period. So I've been really fortunate. When I got hired here at Allegheny, we ended up hiring Matt Cochran, who was with me in my first stint at Allegheny back in 2017 and 18. Probably the only person in the world that I would have entrusted to call the offense, and he did a great job assimilating himself back to Meadville and to Allegheny College. By the end of the year, he had kind of taken the reins and run with it. So, again, something Coach Coleman mentioned. I'm excited. I'll still coach the quarterbacks. I'll be more involved in special teams this fall. But to have those same three guys, it allows me to take a little bit more of a whole approach to the program. Being able to carve out 5-10 minutes, whether that's at the start, middle, or end of practice, to go down and be with the defensive guys, right? To spend more time with the special teams units, I certainly believe will pay dividends. And in our year-end meetings with players, that was one of the consistent messages from guys that weren't on the offensive side of the football. Coach, we would love to see you around a little bit more on our side, right? Or is there a way in which you can be involved, even if it's something as simple as a turnover circuit, for the defensive guys at the beginning of that area of practice? So having those coordinators, I think, will really be a great addition for us coming back in year two.
As we've talked about with other schools that have been up so far, a lot of close losses last year for them. Last fall, your team took a significant step forward despite the overall record remaining the same, as 3 losses were by a single possession and 4 were decided by 10 points or less. How do you build off of those close games and take the next step forward to start converting those into wins?
Yeah, for guys like Zach and for other upperclassmen, a lot of those games, particularly against top opponents, were really the first times they've felt significant, meaningful fourth quarter snaps against those teams. So it's one thing to actually be put in those situations, which now we have been. It's another thing to try to get over the hump. When I got hired here, and I think sitting in this room a year ago, we said the goal and the expectation was try to play 40 tough quarters of football, give everybody our best effort. And I think, man, maybe outside of one quarter against Case Western, the last game of the season, I felt we did a pretty darn good job of doing that. But ultimately, that's never the end goal. It's not why we came here. So for Zach, I'm sure one of the reasons he can attest for why he came back is to get over the hump. Getting in those one-score games is no longer good enough, and it's our expectation that we got to start turning some of those close losses into wins, and I think we can do that sooner rather than later.
Okay. Thank you so much, Coach. And now we have a couple questions for Zach. Heading into year 2 under Coach Lair, does it feel like the team has a full grasp of the systems, and is it more prepared than you were at this time last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I say, like Coach Lair says, this was the first opportunity we had to get a full spring ball and, spring lifting program. And I think, the whole team really bought into the lifting program that we have. Shout out to Coach Corey and Coach Jared. They're the best strength coaches, So, yeah, I think we're definitely ahead of where we were at last year, and we're ready to get going this year.
Looking at your side of the ball specifically, the defense returns a majority of its starters and several key role players. How confident are you guys on defense knowing that you have so many experienced players back?
It definitely helps the confidence. I think maybe one of the most underrated stats in football is, snaps played. So I think having a lot of guys coming back that have had those snaps and have, had significant playing time in previous years, that definitely helps, how we feel looking forward to this season and just the relationships that the guys have on the defense, especially, it's such a tight group that, they're my brothers and, we're ready to go and just, yeah.
So a common theme today has been talking about close games, and Coach Layers touched on that with some of how many close games you had last year. What do you think helped the team close that gap between those tough opponents, and what do you think the team needs to do to start flipping those close games into wins?
I know, especially from the defensive side of the ball, something we've tried to hammer home starting past season was that the football is the program. That's the most important part of the game. So we do our best to fly around and get to the ball. In practice and games, whether that's an incompletion 30 yards downfield, defensive guys like D-line will be hauling after that ball, trying to get it, because that's what we're really trying to get going here. Yeah.
So you're entering your final year as a college football player. What would you like to see the team achieve in your final season on the field as an Allegheny Gator?
The thing that I've always said, with my teammates and my coaches is that, the main goal is to play meaningful football in November. So that's really all we're trying to do here. But more than that, I'm really just trying to have a good time with my best friends and, make good memories this year.
Okay. Thank you, Zach, and thanks again to Coach Lair, whose second season at the helm of the Gators kicks off September 7th with a road game at Bethany. Coach Braden Lair, and linebacker Zach Altenbaugh.